What's up, AP Psych? This is Unit 7, Lecture number 2, Hunger and Sex Motivation. So we've already had our intro to motivation, and we have some general ideas of how there's some biological factors that make us do what we do, and then there's some psychological factors that make us do what we do, and they interact, and that really is where motivation comes from. Is it ever just one theory? No, of course not. And the same will go for this too. So, learning targets, actually not too many, but this is very generic. So of course, there's always a lot crammed into something very generic as well. Okay, what triggers hunger? We're going to talk about these 3 physical drives, these 3 things that create internal pushes to eat. So physically, the first reason why we eat are stomach contractions. It's not just, oh my gosh, my stomach is growling because like it thinks I'm hungry. No, your stomach is actually growling, sending a signal to the brain to make you aware that you're hungry. That's what that is. Simple one. Yay, for once, a simple one. And the next reason why we physically feel hunger is body chemistry. Part of your body chemistry are your glucose levels. Glucose is essentially sugar, and as it metabolizes, or in other words, breaks down, it gives your body energy. So if you do not have enough glucose in your body, low glucose levels will signal to you that you are hungry. Your glucose levels are monitored by the receptors in your stomach, liver, and intestines. So they travel up your neurons and talk to your brain. And your glucose levels are regulated by insulin. Insulin helps bring your glucose levels down, so it helps you break down that glucose. We don't need to get into all of it, but essentially, if your body is unable to properly, if your pancreas, which releases insulin, is not able to do its job, doesn't release insulin enough or in a predictable manner, that's where diabetes comes from. And the third physical, what am I calling this? Physical trigger of hunger is the hypothalamus. So to review what the hypothalamus is, we learned about it in Unit 2. And there we go. Got my cool little graphic brain moving. We talked about the hypothalamus in Unit 2 because what it does is it coordinates the autonomic nervous system and the endocrine system together in the brain. So it sits in the brain and it's coordinating those 2 systems to maintain your body's homeostasis. So it regulates, remember the 4 F's, fighting, fleeing, feeding, and fornicating. It is in charge of those drives. And so the autonomic nervous system being the automatic system, so the involuntary things that your body does, like raising your heart rate or lowering your heart rate or causing you to sweat if your body temperature goes too high, or triggering you to feel hungry. Okay, so the endocrine system works in conjunction with the autonomic nervous system by releasing certain hormones at certain times to cause you to feel hungry. Within the hypothalamus, there are 2 specialized sections that also affect hunger. The lateral hypothalamus triggers hunger when glucose is low. Researchers have found that if you destroy it in an animal like a rat or a cat or a monkey, the animal will actually starve because there's nothing in their brain signaling that drive to kick in. A good way to remember this one is to remember the phrase, let's eat, I'm hangry. Okay, so let's eat, I'm hangry, because the lateral hypothalamus, the LH, triggers hunger. Okay, so it's telling your body to eat. The ventromedial hypothalamus, the VMH, depresses hunger when glucose is up. It signals satiety. And this is basically just a word that means you should feel full. You should be satisfied that you have eaten enough. Okay, so the ventromedial hypothalamus stops your hunger, tells you you're full when your glucose is up. Okay, so to stop raising your glucose levels. Researchers have found that if you destroy that section of the hypothalamus, an animal will eat excessively to the point where it will burst. The good way to remember that one, I don't know if this is a good way, but a phrase, vomit my huge hamburger. You are going to vomit because your hamburger was so huge. Not the best mnemonic devices, but, hopefully it helps. Let's talk about set point theory. This is slightly controversial because the idea behind it is that all of our bodies have a set weight, no matter what we do in terms of diet and exercise, or lack thereof. It's an idea that a body has a weight thermostat, and our body constantly is adjusting it because it is predisposed to keep a steady weight. Okay? So if you work really hard to overcome your set point and you lose weight, based on this theory, your body is going to just make you hungry more often and burn less calories or less energy. So let me go through that in reference to what I've got here. If weight is lost, if your weight drops, your body is going to signal you to increase your food intake, and it's going to slow down your metabolism to burn less energy. In the same way, if you gain weight, it will signal you to eat less food and your metabolism will rise to make you burn more energy. The idea is that your body is adjusting your food intake and your energy output and something called your basal metabolic rate to keep you at this set point. Your basal metabolic rate is the rate of energy spent for maintaining body functions while at rest. So arguably right now, I'm not doing anything but sitting in my chair and talking. So my basal, almost like my basal metabolic rate, how many calories I'm burning to be able to breathe, to talk, to blink, to have my heart beat, those normal things. Not talking about my heart rate when I'm meditating and purposefully dropping it, or if I am undergoing a fight or flight event or exercising, okay? So the set point, basically the long and short of it is that there's this belief that no matter what you do, your body's always constantly adjusting itself to maintain, within a few pounds, a set weight. And while that might be frustrating to hear, especially if that's something that you've tried to do is to adjust your body weight, little reassurance is that some researchers believe that slow, sustained changes in body weight can change your actual set point. So it is still possible to work on losing weight or work on gaining weight and keeping it up or down if you do it slowly and gradually. So yo-yo dieting doesn't work. If you lose weight very, very quickly because you take extreme steps, your set point isn't being adjusted. So your body's going to compensate to make you gain that weight right back. Same goes for if you're purposefully trying to gain weight and you do it very quickly, your body's going to fight that instinct to bring you back to where you were. But if you do it slowly and gradually, you can basically change that internal weight point that your body, that according to this theory, that your body has. This also demonstrates that your brain influences your weight too, not just diet and exercise. So that's an important psychological connection. Speaking of which, everything we've talked about so far has really been your physical triggers for hunger. So all of your push factors, your internal push factors pushing you to eat or pushing you towards hunger. But then what about the pull factors, the psychological external factors getting you to eat? Well, we have a whole slew of external incentives in society and in our daily lives that trigger us to eat high fat and high caloric food, most likely food that's really, really tasty, simply by that food being in front of you. Examples of this include eating by the clock, so eating simply because it's breakfast or dinner time. Social eating, if you're at a party or maybe a holiday gathering, especially something like Thanksgiving where it's expected that you're just going to eat a lot. Looking to things like maybe ice cream or chocolate or as time goes on, maybe craving a glass of alcohol or some other food that or substance that you know is really bad for you because you think it makes you feel better when you're feeling stressed or depressed. And then other cues like just being at special events or just saying, hey, I'm watching a movie on TV, it's time to bust out the popcorn. So there's all sorts of psychological external factors that can trigger your eating as well. And also the concept of taste preference. In addition to those factors that I just mentioned, and in addition to our physical drives, the physical triggers of that drive us to eat, body chemistry and environmental factors can also influence when we feel hunger and what we feel hungry for. In some societies, it is very normal to have dinner very, very late at night, much later than Americans typically do, or to have a brunch instead of breakfast. And then in terms of what we eat, whatever we feel is most normal or tasty to us might be dramatically different for someone else. So you put a bunch of deep fried insects in front of me, I'm not going to feel a desire to eat, but someone else might. Shifting gears to a more serious topic, we are going to learn 3 types of eating disorders. First, I'm going to define them, the difference between them, and then I'll talk a little bit about some common threads as to what causes them. Anorexia nervosa is when a normal weighted person loses dramatic amounts of weight continuously, yet still feels overweight. Typically, this occurs the most in adolescent females. Bulimia nervosa are when someone experiences episodes of overeating, usually high-calorie foods, followed by vomiting, laxative use, fasting, or excessive exercise. In other words, the overeating is immediately followed by extreme steps to get rid of what was just consumed. That's a little bit different than simply binge eating, and it's not simple because it's less severe, but it's simple because it's only got half of that process. So this is recurrent binge eating, or in other words, recurrent overeating without any type of purging, as in bulimia. So this is all different ways of purging. Typically, purging means vomiting, but bulimia nervosa, you're doing that overeating, that binge eating, but then you're trying to get rid of all of those calories in an unnatural way. Binge eating, you're just doing the binging, but without that purging. So couple things to note about this. Most people that experience an eating disorder are actually average or possibly slightly overweight, or at least the beginning before their eating disorder kicks in. In other words, we're not talking about someone who's extremely overweight and then has some sort of overreaction. Most people are actually an average weight, so it becomes less about their weight and more about their psychological motivations. Some causes include low self-esteem, being stressed, trying to match a cultural idea of attractiveness, using food to cope with experiences of depression, and possible biological issues with the hypothalamus. We can clearly see that brain chemistry and body chemistry have a strong influence over hunger drives. There also could be a genetic predisposition or just other social influences that cause these eating disorders. Which leads us to a stark reminder that body image, our obsession with body image, especially females, is kind of messed up in our culture. Western culture tends to overemphasize thin body image more than other cultures, and we need to remember that half of the images we see on social media or traditional media are photoshopped. But as women try to live up to those standards, they often lose too much weight in the process because they're striving for something that was attained through a computer, not through natural diet and exercise. What we do know is that cultures in general who put more emphasis on appearance have higher rates of eating disorders. So in certain cultures where that thin body image is not the norm or is not the model to be emulated, their rates of eating disorders are much lower. Altogether, eating, hunger is a biopsychosocial behavior, meaning it is not just one thing that we can point to. It is influenced by biology, as you see on this chart. As you see over here, it is influenced by psychological factors, as we see over here. And then it is influenced by sociocultural factors, as we see right here. So eating behavior is not simply defined, and it is not even just one thing. All of these things all pour into the same bucket that cause you to eat or not eat at any given moment.